Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Sorry. All right, let's see.
How was the wedding?
Very good.
That's good.
I'm very glad it's over.
Yeah, I bet you both are.
All right. So we have been going through the Mosaic covenant for a while. And so we've reached chapter 19, which some of this is legal, and that's very important to understand. But this time we're going to start talking about, once again, the cities of refuge.
Okay, what is what do you mean the Mosaic?
Okay, so it's the law under Moses.
Oh, okay.
Mosaic.
Mosaic. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I'm thinking like pictures.
Yeah,
Mosaic.
I understand. But it's the law. It's the
Moses's law.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Why did Moses have his own laws?
So it's not that they're his own laws. It's that they were given to the people from God through Moses.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. And so it's called the Mosaic covenant because it's
Through him.
Moses was the leader at the time.
At
Yeah.
the time.
Okay.
Okay.
So what we're about to talk about this is a very interesting discussion that they get into, which is the cities of refuge.
Yes.
We've talked about it before, but this is another point of this. So when the Lord your God cuts off the nations whose land the Lord your God is giving you, and you dispossess them and dwell in their cities and in their houses, you shall set apart 3 cities for yourselves in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. Okay. So the idea is when they have been given the land, okay, they're to set apart 3 cities for a special purpose. That's the idea. And it goes on and it says, you shall measure the distance and divide into 3 parts the area of the land that the Lord your God gives you for possession. So it's saying they need to be centralized into 3 regions within the land of Canaan. And then there are actually 3 more on the eastern side of the Jordan. Okay, so there are actually 6 total, but this is talking specifically in the land.
On the other side of the Jordan.
The purpose for this is so that any manslayer can flee to them. Now, it's going to explain. What we're about to be talking about is you accidentally kill somebody.
Okay.
Okay, and it will give this. This is the provision for the manslayer, who by fleeing there may save his life. If anyone kills his neighbor unintentionally, without having hated him in the past, as when someone goes into the forest with his neighbor to cut wood, his hand swings the axe to cut down a tree, the head slips from the handle and strikes the neighbor so that he dies. Okay.
Total accident.
So,
Yeah.
or a kind of a negligent, or there's a possibility that it could be negligent, but there was no intention to kill.
Yes.
Hey, Gib, how are you? Here you go.
Have a seat.
You're not late. We just got started. Okay. So what we will,
2019.
what we will find as we go forward is that the discussion here, if it was an intentional murder, then this does not qualify.
Right.
Okay, it is an accidental thing. So there are a couple of other ideas that it gives in some other places that you punch him so
hard that they die.
and you didn't mean to kill him or whatever.
Or
Okay.
car wreck or something, yeah.
Right. Of course, at this time there would be no cars.
Right.
But
Oh, yeah.
he may flee to one of these cities and live. So here is the idea. Part of their system at this time, Deuteronomy 19.
Oh,
That's a little far.
You're so good. His nose always runs when he starts Bible study.
Oh my gosh, it never fails.
I know, it doesn't.
Oh, it drives me crazy. I'm allergic to Dawn. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay. So part of their system was that, like, you killed a family member, then they could send one of the members of their family to kill you back.
That was in the law?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's called a family avenger.
A family avenger. Okay. So, but what would happen is, and this is the idea, you killed him accidentally, you run, and you get to one of the cities of refuge. The family avenger could come looking for you, but if he found you at the city of refuge, then you would be put on trial.
And they'd have to go in front of a judge,
They
right?
they would go in before someone who would make the city elders would decide whether you killed the guy intentionally or not. Okay. So, lest the avenger of blood in hot anger pursues the manslayer and overtakes him, because the way is too far and strikes him fatally, though the man did not deserve to die, since he had not hated his neighbor in the past. So the idea is an avenger's coming, you make sure that the distance isn't so far that you're going to get caught. It's kind of the
Go
idea.
to the far one.
Go to the furthest
Go to the furthest
Okay.
one away.
Yeah.
So therefore I command you, you shall set apart 3 cities. And if the Lord your God enlarges your territory, as he has sworn to your father, and gives you all the land he's promised to give to your fathers, provided that you keep all this commandment, okay, which I command you today by loving the Lord your God and walking in his ways. So if the land gets bigger, so that there's more distance for you to cover, then add more cities. Add an additional 3 cities.
Keep adding them.
Just keep at it.
Okay. So, but the idea here is that the city of refuge, then, if you are found innocent, then the avenger can't come in and kill you. Okay. If you're found guilty, then they hand you over to him.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's an additional discussion here that says that if you are found not to have killed them on purpose, in order to avoid vengeance from the family, you have to stay in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest, who was high priest when you did it.
Okay,
So,
wait, high priest from their city or from the city that you're
well,
going?
remember, there's only one high priest.
Oh,
So there's one high
Okay.
priest that was over all 6 cities then.
There's one
Of
high priest
all-
who's over all worship in Israel.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
So the high priest at the tabernacle, or later the temple.
Yeah,
So as long as he is as long as it's the same high priest,
you can't return.
if you leave the city of refuge, then the avenger can kill you.
Okay.
Okay. But
Might as well
uh-huh.
take
But
it.
once the high priest dies, then you can go home and and if the avenger kills you then he's guilty of murder.
Oh, then. Oof, okay.
Mhm. Okay. But then it goes on and it says, okay. But if anyone hates his neighbor and lies in wait for him and attacks him and strikes him fatally so that he dies, and he flees to one of these cities, then the elders of his city shall send and take him from there and hand him over to the avenger of blood. Okay. So if it's shown that he lied in wait and that he was murderous towards the guy,
Prior
then
to
the
that.
city of refuge is not a refuge for him.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So he's got to leave either way if he's found guilty.
Well, if he's
But
found
if
guilty,
done-
then they hand him over. They extradite him.
Right.
You're extradited, bro. You can go back to your murder.
Well, and that's still part of the way we do things now. Take the guy who burned down the Clovis or burned the Clovis Walmart. They found him in Lubbock, and it took a few months for them to get it all worked out and all that, but they've extradited him back to New Mexico to face trial for the arson.
I
they
did
got
not know
extradited.
that.
Oh wow, I thought it was like an accident.
No.
Oh
Oh, no, he meant to
he
do it.
burned it down.
Yeah.
He burned it.
On purpose.
Uh-huh.
He set up propane bottles and all that sort of stuff, and
Oh, wow.
he broke into the store and set it on fire.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. It was bad too. The morning that happened, I was leaving Eric's at like 5 a.m, and there was just the whole thing. There was cops everywhere, and they're still smoking.
Yeah, it was
They-
bad.
So somebody lit the Walmart on fire.
$400 million in damage.
Yeah, I think you called me and told me.
Uh-huh.
They've opened again,
Yeah,
or
just
part
barely.
the part of the grocery has opened again. All right. So anyway, that is the cities of refuge. If you are guilty and you meant to do it, then and notice it's this kind of an interesting way. Your eye shall not pity him. So there shall be no remorse, no pity.
Yeah.
He killed somebody, and so you shall purge the guilt of innocent blood from Israel.
Gotcha.
He shed someone else's blood, so he dies in. Okay. Now, the next one is, it's just one verse, but it's talking about property boundaries, which is kind of an interesting discussion. Remember that the land is a very important part of all of this because the land is given to you by God. You shall not move your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set in the inheritance that you will hold in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So in this case, what we're talking about is, and I don't know how much it's done here, but like in a lot of places, they'll have a flag that's at the corner of the property
Mhm.
Property one.
or a
Yeah,
Now
post
we have
that's at.
fences, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now Mary has got like posts in the ground, like
Mhm.
metal posts that are.
But like you can still see today, if you watch any of like these court TV type of
Oh,
things,
really?
there will be major issues when somebody builds a fence and well, it turns out it's a foot
We
onto
have
my
that issue
property
at my mom's right now with about 3 inches. This guy's having a fit over.
because
Uh-huh. He wants
property
3 inches. He wants us to rebuild our whole fence over 3 inches.
uh-huh. And that's fairly normal.
That's freaking ridiculous. What's
But-
3 inches?
But that's the discussion. You shall not encroach on your neighbor's property by moving the boundary.
Mm.
Okay, because at that time they would have a stone or something
Mhm.
that marked their boundary.
Yeah, that's still, most of the time it's still like that.
And so, oh, well, I want another 3 feet, so pick up their boundary.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and move this.
Okay, so now the next one is talking about witnesses, how they deal with witnesses of a crime. So a single witness shall not suffice against a person for any crime or for any wrong in connection with any offense that he has committed. So you will never convict anyone on one witness.
Yeah, that's not true anymore.
No, I was thinking the same thing, man. They don't hold to that anymore.
But okay, only on the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses shall a charge be established. Now, understand in this case, we are talking about almost certainly in this discussion, we're talking about capital crime. Okay.
Being like murder
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
rape, maybe would
Yeah.
rape be considered
Yeah.
a capital crime?
Like the big fellas.
Well, a crime
Major
that's
felonies,
a
kidnapping.
crime that means you're going to die.
Oh yeah, okay, okay,
I
that
think
makes
we were
sense.
better off if we were still doing that.
Okay.
I agree.
So if a malicious witness, so if you find out that a witness is being malicious and is lying, okay, or here's the interesting discussion. If a malicious witness arises to accuse a person of wrongdoing, then both parties to the dispute shall appear before the Lord. So here's the idea. Okay. You have a guy who is being accused of something, and he says that the witness is lying. Okay, because he's malicious. He's trying to.
Getting killed.
Yeah.
Both parties shall appear before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who were in office in those days. The judges shall inquire diligently, and if the witness is a false witness and has accused his brother falsely, okay, so watch, this is a judicial discussion. If you have a witness, you check to make sure their witness is verifiable, and if you find out that they had a major grudge against the other person and they're lying to try to get them killed, then they receive the punishment they were trying to get on their neighbor.
I guess that would be a big deterrent to false witness.
Uh-huh.
Or snitches.
Or
Well, but remember, what is one of the 10 Commandments? Don't bear
doing that
false
about
witness.
Yeah.
Okay, so you shall purge the evil from your midst. and the rest shall hear and fear and shall never again commit any such evil among you. So if you find out that bearing false witness gets you killed, then you probably won't do it.
You probably- it's a good deterrent to people lying, and there's a lot of that in this world.
Okay. So, but then it comes back again. Your eye shall not pity. It shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Okay. Now let's make sure we understand what's going on. He's establishing what justice is. Okay. So we talk about in the new covenant, we talk about mercy. And by the way, mercy is a part of the old covenant. But in this legal stuff, he is setting the idea of justice. If what you did cost somebody their life, then you pay your life. If what you did cost somebody their eye, you lose your eye.
Is this where they get that whole eye for an eye
Mhm.
crap? Like,
Tooth for tooth.
because I've been told that like a lot growing up by my dad.
But let's
Really?
make sure we understand in context what this is
Yeah,
talking
let's
about.
explain it.
This is not talking about you taking revenge. This is talking
See,
about
that's the way I was taught.
we are talking about a judicial
Punishment.
punishment. The punishment will, and by the way, this is actually how we do it. It's not exactly the same thing, but what do you hear? The punishment will fit the crime.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I laugh because I heard a comedian once talk about that in our Bill of Rights, it says that you'll be free from cruel and unusual punishment. Okay. And this comedian goes, okay, cruel, I get, but do you think there's ever been a judge that kind of skirted that line for unusual punishment?
Oh, I'm sure.
But understand the idea here is that you will repay in kind.
Well, I think that we should still do that. I know that we're supposed to like protect, like in our constitution says the cruel and unusual thing. But if they are cruel and unusual in their crime, shouldn't they
So,
reap that also, like kidnapping and torturing?
but there is a discussion of,
Torture.
I understand what you're saying. Okay. True justice would be, and by the way, let's deal with some of the discussions of this. So, what is an appropriate punishment for raping someone?
Raping them with barbed wire.
No, they need to
frozen
be shot in their heads.
Okay. So you have people that say the way you handle that is you either kill them or you castrate them.
Yeah. That works.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
By the way, you go to some countries and if you're caught stealing, they cut your hand off.
Still.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you do it again, then they cut your head off.
Oh, they cut your head off?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's not a
What?
3-strike policy.
It's
It's 2 strikes.
Oh, darn.
But what I would tell you is this. Okay. The idea here and the idea of the discussion of justice. Okay. When we talk about that statement, we have a system that has said, if you do this, this is the range of punishment you may receive. Okay. That is justice. You get what you deserve. And whether we agree with what they've said as the penalties,
Or don't, yeah, okay.
okay, that is the discussion. It's not a personal thing. See, it's not, well, you killed my kid, so I get to shoot you. Right?
Right.
Okay. In this, we see a couple of places where it talks about within their culture, they had a system that allowed you to take the law into your own hands. And when someone killed your family member,
Yeah.
our judicial system does not
Does not
allow
allow
that. Okay. We have to trust in,
Yeah.
The judges. and
right. Okay. But understand what it's saying is don't there ought to be a penalty for you perjuring yourself.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
Okay. And in this case, for this group of people, what God said is you get the punishment you were trying to get on them.
Which makes sense.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think that there's benefit in a lot of these, the way he's
Right.
laying this out. Like I don't know where we got off of this. Like,
But there are some places also in this where you wouldn't want the way they set it up.
yeah, you're right. There's a lot of places in this that I wouldn't want it.
Now, let me make sure, because this is part of this discussion. Or you certainly, if it was you, wouldn't want them to deal with it the way that this says. You may want them to deal with that way for somebody else,
Right.
Yeah.
but not if you did it.
Not if I, well, I'm special.
Okay. But the idea here is that, and by the way, this is the prominent element of this, and the reason this "your eye shall not pity him" comes up. We are called to be set apart for God.
Yes.
And to do this is to rebel against God. And so to the one who rebels against God, you shall show no pity. Okay. That is an old covenant idea. In the new covenant, we're to tell them about the one who died in their place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. However, don't miss this. There is still justice in the new covenant. Okay. We talked about this a little bit this morning. So, I had a guy that I knew. He was an evangelist, and his two grandchildren were killed in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And a little bit later, God began to tell him, you need to go and witness to Timothy McVeigh.
Oh.
And at first he was like, no, I want him to go to hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And he said, God began to, and this is how he phrased it, God began to punish me for my bitterness. My health went downhill, all this sort of stuff, until finally I said, okay, God, I'll do whatever you want. Okay. Justice, and this is God's picture. Let me say it this way. In our own hearts, what do we think Timothy McVeigh deserves?
Electric chair.
Okay. And guess what? He died for his crimes.
Yeah.
Okay. He received the death penalty. However, okay, there is a choice in his life after what happened in Oklahoma City.
Right.
Okay, this man went and witnessed to him. If he chose to accept Christ, then in the same way as for us, Christ's sacrifice paid for his sin. And when he died, as a penalty for what he did, he would go to heaven.
Thank God for that.
If, however, he rejects the gift of God,
He goes to hell.
and he receives justice. Understand, hell equals justice.
Yeah, and I don't want justice. And I certainly don't want my past life coming against me. Because I work really hard to be a different person than I was. Like,
Right.
because I was bad.
But that is an element that a lot in our culture don't understand. Because what will they say? Well, a loving God won't send anybody to hell.
No, a just God will
Okay.
give people what they
But
deserve.
let me make sure you understand. God, if you go to hell, it's not because God sent you there.
Nope. That's for sure.
Okay. If you go to hell, it is because you chose for the entirety of your life to reject and step and spit on and rebel against the grace and mercy of God. And so a loving God says, well, if that's what you want, okay.
Yeah.
Right. There comes a point, and look at it from the idea of a parent. If your kid rebels against what you're trying to tell him that is for his own good, or her own good. Eventually you say, okay, if that's really what you want,
How about it?
and then what do you have to do? You have to let them
Have
go
it.
through the consequences.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's at any age.
Yeah.
You need to
Stay
stop.
with the whole-
You need to stop talking back to me, or you're going to be punished.
Yeah.
And you give them opportunities. They continue. Okay, if you really want the punishment for that, then here you go.
There you go. This is it. Yeah. Yeah, my daughter's dealing with some of that right now.
If you don't do your homework, you're going to get an F and be eligible for.
And if you don't clean your room, you're going to lose your Alexa. All that. Yeah.
So there are. By the way, that is an issue within the discussion of parenting. Is natural consequences.
Yeah, like
that
you walk outside barefoot, you might step on a sticker.
So, but as we go further, so let's deal with it on this one. So if you decide to go and get drunk and drive a car, what are the natural consequences?
You could kill somebody, you could kill yourself, you could
get pulled over by a police officer and go to jail. And okay, if you decide to sleep with every person you can come into, what are the natural consequences? Pregnancy. Okay, now watch, because this is a very important thing. Those things are not someone punishing you. That is the natural consequence of your decision.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that comes into two areas, because there's also the idea of sometimes you can make a poor decision, and there can be a consequence of a poor decision that also is not your fault. Okay. I'll give you an example. I decide to walk down a crime-ridden street in San Francisco waving money over my head.
Any street in San Francisco would be bad.
Okay. And I get mugged.
That's your own dummy.
Nope. The person who mugged me is at fault.
Okay.
But my bad decision did not help that.
Did not help that at all.
Okay. It's kind of like the joke, if you don't want to get jumped in a dark alley, what do? Don't go down a dark alley. It's not go take karate and kung fu and all that. It's just don't go down a dark alley. So understand that some of this discussion is God saying, these are the natural consequences of these actions. And so don't show pity.
For them having.
They did what they did. And because they did what they did, here is what I've said has to happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Say he wasn't showing pity, he was just following God himself.
So, but that's a different thing. Showing pity, okay, in this case, it's actually the discussion of having a double standard.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's say the town, the least popular guy in town does something. Well, you execute him right away. The most popular guy in town does the same thing. We like him, so.
Or the richest or whatever. Yeah, that makes sense.
You will be fair in the disposition of judgment. Okay. All right. Chapter 20. When you go out to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots and an army larger than your own, you shall not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God is with you. Okay. So when you go out into war, you're going to come against armies that are way bigger than you and have way better weapons than you and have way better. Okay. But don't be afraid, because the Lord is with you, and he brought you out of the land of Egypt against a really big army that
basically kicked you out and gave you all their gold and silver.
And when you draw near to the battle, the priest shall come forward and speak to the people, and shall say to them, Okay. Hear, O Israel, today you are drawing near for battle against your enemies. Let not your heart be faint. Okay, so here's the discussion. He is giving them instructions for how to go into battle. Okay, so you have an enemy coming. Don't be afraid. Line up, and then have the priest come and have them say, "Hear, O Israel, today you're drawing near for battle against your enemies. Let not your heart be faint. Do not fear or panic or be dread of them. For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you the victory." Okay. Now, this is an important element here. And it's important because of something that happens a few generations later. Okay, so in 1 Samuel, we have this story about the army of Saul has lined up for battle against the armies of the Philistines. Okay, and they're lined up ready for battle. And suddenly this really big guy walks out onto the battlefield, and he says, "Let's do this with champions." Okay, so I'll be the Philistine champion, and you send out your biggest, strongest guy, and we'll do battle one on one. And then if I win, you become our slaves, and if you win, we'll become your slaves. And everybody in Israel is so focused on how big and strong and bad Goliath is, no one will go fight
Until that little David boy.
until David. Now, watch how it fits in this discussion. You're drawing near to battle against your enemies. Don't let your heart be faint, which is exactly what happened to them. Their hearts melted. Okay. For the Lord your God is he who is going with you to fight for you against your enemies. So don't miss this discussion. The issue that we run into so often that causes us fear and causes us not to be willing to do what God has called us to do is we are too focused on the big guy in front of us and not focused enough on the God who is going to give us victory. Okay. When you look at the story of David and Goliath, you will see a marked difference between everyone else's focus and David's focus. Okay. Saul, David's brothers, all the army. Oh my gosh, he's big and he's been a warrior his entire life, and he's okay.
Yeah.
And David goes, yeah, he's just an uncircumcised Philistine who's talking bad about God.
Yeah.
In the entire story in 1 Samuel, David treats Goliath like an afterthought. Okay. He comes against Goliath, and Goliath says, "Oh, am I a dog that you come at me with a stick?" Because David doesn't even have a sword.
Yeah.
He's carrying a sling. He's got 5 rocks in his pocket. Now, I want to make sure you understand, because I think sometimes we miss this. The rocks David had were not little stones like you think of for a slingshot. They were round stones, probably about the size of a baseball. Okay. And a good slingman could throw them at 150 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So a sling works, by the way, just so you understand, a sling works by lengthening the arm. Okay. But also because you spin it.
Rotation.
So a major league pitcher can throw a baseball at 100 miles an hour. You take a rope, a piece of cord that's about another 4 foot long, and spin it. You can put an incredible amount of speed on it. And there is a story later in the Bible that tells that there were men from the tribe of Benjamin who could knock the eye out of a bird in flight with a sling.
Wow.
Okay, they were that accurate.
That's pretty accurate.
So please understand that when we talk about the weapons of the battle, David is not under-equipped.
No.
He's equipped differently, but he is carrying a weapon that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, because doesn't he say, like, I've killed lions and
Well, but he
What's this?
killed the lion with his bare hands.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
To protect the sheep.
To protect the sheep.
Yeah.
But David comes to Goliath with his shepherd pole and his sling and the stones. And Goliath goes, "Oh, you're coming at me with a stick? Am I a dog? So I'm going to kill you and feed you to the birds." And David goes, "Oh, no. Don't miss this, Goliath. You're just an uncircumcised Philistine and you've spoken ill of the God of Israel. And so he's going to let me kill you. And I'm going to take one of these stones and I'm going to hit you in the head and you're going to fall over. And then I'm going to grab your sword and I'm going to cut your head off with your own sword," which is exactly what he does. And he says, "Because you have defied the God of Israel." Okay. So the story of David and Goliath is everyone else is looking at Goliath and David is looking past Goliath at his God. And his God is way bigger than
Way bigger
Goliath.
than Goliath.
Okay. So the priest comes and says, "Hey, remember, don't be afraid because the Lord's going to give you victory." Okay. And by the way, there are a number of times that the Israelites didn't even have to fight.
Yeah, where they just ran away, or God put confusion in the
So,
camp of the enemy.
In the story of Gideon, now they ended up fighting, but the battle was over before they ever stepped into the fight. And the story of Gideon is another one of those kind of interesting stories. Gideon gathers himself an army, and God goes, "No, too big."
Oh yeah.
And he knocks him down to 300 guys. He's going against an army of probably 1 million men.
With 300 guys.
With 300 guys. And what they do is they get up in the mountains around them with a torch inside of a pot and a horn. And they blow the horn and they pull out the torch and they yell to God. And God, basically all the men down in the valley kill each other in confusion.
Yep. He does some amazing stuff. And
in the story of Isaiah, he killed an angel of the Lord came and killed 185,000 Assyrians in one night. Okay. So what is it saying? When you go into battle, it doesn't matter how big their army is because your God's bigger.
Yeah.
Then, by the way, it actually is interesting. Then the officers shall speak to the people saying, "Is there anyone who just built a new house and hasn't dedicated it?" So anybody in the army just finished your house and you haven't had a chance to live in it yet? Yes. Okay, go home.
That's what they mean by dedicated it, not
Uh-huh.
lived in it yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let him go back to his house unless he die in battle and have another man dedicated. Is there a man who's planted a vineyard in it and has not had the first harvest? Okay, go home. Is there anyone who's fearful and faint-hearted? They're just scared.
Go home.
And go home. Now, another interesting discussion within this is not in this place, but it tells that if a man got married, okay.
Betrothed his wife.
Right. But so first of all, has any man betrothed the wife and has not consummated the relationship yet? Go home. Okay. But later there's a place where it says a man could not serve in the army the first year he was married.
Really?
He stayed home with his wife.
Honestly, can make babies, huh?
Probably. Well, that's kind of cool.
But understand, and it's such an interesting discussion. Do any of you have some reason why you shouldn't be here?
Any other
Then go home.
issues? Go home.
Go home. Are you just scared and faint-hearted? Then go home. And in this case, go home so you don't spread that fear to everybody else.
Yeah. Because that's like wildfire.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's not the number. It's God. So then it goes on. When you draw near to a city to fight against it, offer terms of peace first. And if it responds to you peacefully and it opens to you, then all the people who are found in it shall do forced labor for you and shall serve you. Okay. But if it makes no peace with you, then you shall besiege it. Okay. If they decide to surrender, then let them. When the Lord your God gives it into your hands, you shall put all the males to the sword if they don't surrender. But the women and the little ones, the livestock, everything else in it, all its spoil, you shall take as plunder for yourselves. Now, in our culture, that sounds terrible. But in that culture, that would have been very much the way it was done. And by the way, part of this is also to keep them pure. Okay.
But that's why the provisions in there don't marry any of the women,
Don't marry any of the women. Okay.
in case they do whatever.
You shall enjoy the spoil of your enemy, which the Lord your God has given you. Then you shall do to all the cities that are thus you shall do to all the cities that are very far from you, which are not cities of the nations here. Now, this is an important element. What he's saying is if you go and make war against a place that is not within the boundaries of Israel, then this is how you're to handle it. But if they're within the boundaries, if they're one of the Canaanites, that's not how you handle
No,
it.
you slaughter all them, right?
Now, this is one of those things that our culture really hates because they'll say, well, it was genocide. It is something more than that. Okay. It is judgment from God.
Yes.
Now, let me explain why. Some of you have heard this several times, but I want to make sure I say it. In Genesis, it tells us that the reason that the Jews were in captivity in Egypt for 400 years was so that the sins of the people of Canaan could come to their completion. Okay. So the idea here is this. If you really want to know how this works, God took Jacob and his 69 relatives, there were 70 in all, and he took them into Egypt with Joseph so that for 400 years, actually 430 years, the people of the land of Canaan would have the opportunity to choose to turn to God.
Which they didn't.
And for 430 years, they did not. They continued their pagan practices. They continued sacrificing their children. They continued all the horrible things they were doing. And so we come to the end of what actually ends up being almost 500 years by the time you're all said and done. And the children of Israel are about to go in. He says, look, they are completely devoid of goodness. They have been wicked all this time. I have given them opportunities to turn. They have not turned. And so now my judgment says they all die. By the way, justice says they all die. Okay. Because remember that we talk about later some of the abominable practices of the Israelites later. It's from the Canaanites that they got them. Okay, so all that 500 years, the Canaanites were sacrificing their children to Molech. Okay, and I've said this before, but the way that works is they had a bronze statue of Molech that had his hands like this. They would light a fire in his feet until he glowed red hot, and they would lay their infant children in his red hot hands
To burn
alive.
Hamas were doing that to the babies. They put one in the oven.
I know.
That is a practice that was going on in Canaan while they are in Egypt. And God says, no, that's not okay. And so eventually God says, okay, they have come to the point, much like Sodom and Gomorrah. They have come to the point now where I will no longer show them any mercy. And so you're not to show them any mercy. You kill them all. Okay. So it goes. But in the cities of these people that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance, it's verse 16, you shall save nothing alive that breathes.
Not even the livestock.
Not even the livestock. You shall devote them to complete destruction, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded, that they may not teach you to do according to all their abominable practices that they have done for their gods. And so you sin against the Lord your God. Why do you not leave them? Because they will try to teach you to do all the garbage they did.
Which they do, yeah.
And by the way, in a very real way. And God says it. If you turn to their practices, I'll boot you too.
Yeah. The land will vomit you out.
Yeah, that's the phrasing. The land will vomit you out.
I love that phrase.
Okay. When you besiege a city for a long time, this verse 19, making war against it in order to take it, you shall not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. Okay. You shall not eat, you may not eat, you may eat from them, but you shall not cut them down. Are the trees in the field human that they should be besieged by you? Only the trees that you know are not trees for food you may destroy and cut down, that you may build siege works against the city that makes war with you until it falls. So here is the idea. Okay. And by the way, we see later in warfare this happens. When the Romans would take a settlement, when the Romans had somebody rebel and they were deciding to teach them a lesson, they would deforest the whole place. They'd cut down all the trees.
Why?
Because it changes the climate.
Makes it be windy or no
Well, but
No
it
shelter.
also, the trees help bring rain.
Yeah.
It's weird that it works that way, but in fact, if you were to
Well,
look at it,
rain.
if you would look at it today, Israel is one of the largest groups of people planting trees because the trees help keep the clouds from just blowing by off the Mediterranean. Okay. So what it's saying is now you can cut down trees to make siege works, but make sure it's not the fruit trees.
Yeah, because those trees are
Or the almond trees or the olive trees, or if it's a tree for food, don't cut it down.
Leave it.
And there's a couple of reasons. One is that whenever you're done with this siege, then you have food. Number two is so that you're not causing a situation where they can never recover.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to stop right there. We'll pick up on 21 next time.
I'm sure your son will get it right back to my house.
Okay.
I'll go double check now before we leave. I'm driving this lane.
Okay.
And you can just come home. I gotta make meatloaf. You can even stay for dinner.